The year is 476 CE. Rome, once the eternal city, has fallen. Its emperors toppled, its legions scattered. The western half of the empire lies in ruins. Roads crack, aqueducts dry, amphitheaters echo with silence. Wolves prowl where senators once debated. Europe is not a continent, it is a battlefield. Dozens of tribes carve their kingdoms into Rome's corpse. Goths in Italy, Vandals in Africa, Franks in Gaul, Saxons in Britain. Each claims the legacy of Rome, yet none can truly revive it. And so begins the long road to unity, a road paved not with peace, but with conquest, faith, and blood. Amid the chaos, one kingdom rises above the rest, the Franks. In the late 5th century, their warlord, Clovis I, begins uniting the fractured tribes of Gaul. His armies carve paths through rivals, but Clovis knows brute force alone cannot build something that lasts. Conquest wins land, but belief binds people. He needs more than steel. He needs faith. Legend tells of a turning point. In battle, outnumbered and pressed to the edge, Clovis raises his eyes, not to his pagan gods, but to the Christian god of his wife, Clotilda. He prays for deliverance, and victory follows. Seizing this as a sign, Clovis is baptized, along with 3,000 of his warriors. In that single act, the Franks gained not only a religion, but an ally, the Church in Rome. With faith as his banner, Clovis wove tribe and church, sword and cross, into a new identity. His dynasty, the Merovingians, would be remembered as the long-haired kings. Their flowing locks weren't fashion, but sacred symbols of divine power. To shear a Merovingian was to strip him of his right to rule. Strange, but in medieval Europe, power could hang by a single strand of hair. From the Merovingians came another dynasty, the Carolingians, and from them a titan, Charlemagne. Tall, over 6 feet, a giant in his time, broad-shouldered, restless, relentless. For decades, he rode at the head of armies, uniting lands by fire and faith. He crushed the Lombards in Italy, broke the Avars on the Danube, and waged a brutal, endless war against the pagan Saxons. The Saxons resisted fiercely. Again and again they rose. Again and again Charlemagne returned. In 782, when rebellion flared once more, he ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon prisoners in a single day. Mercy was not his weapon, terror was. And yet, Charlemagne was not only a conqueror, he was a builder. In Aachen, he gathered scholars from across Europe. Monks copied ancient texts. Schools taught Latin. Knowledge flickered back to life in what became known as the Carolingian Renaissance. On Christmas Day, 800 CE, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. Not king, not warlord, emperor, the first in the West since Rome's fall. To many, Charlemagne was Pater Europae, the father of Europe. But empires, like men, do not last forever. When Charlemagne died, his sons quarreled over the crown, turning brother against brother. In 843, the Treaty of Verdun carved his vast empire into 3 kingdoms. The dream of unity, one Europe under a single ruler, fractured into shards. The Vikings thundered in from the north, their longships slicing through rivers like knives. Monasteries burned, and church bells often rang as alarms, not calls to prayer. From the south came Saracen raiders. From the east, the swift Magyar horsemen. Europe seemed doomed to splinter and scatter. Yet the castles held, with moats, sometimes filled not only with water but with sewage and rot. With walls of stone and towers of iron resolve, Europe dug in. It was not unity, but it was survival. In 1095, a thunderous call rang out. Pope Urban II stood before a crowd at Clermont and declared, "Deus vult, God wills it." The First Crusade had begun. Tens of thousands of knights, peasants, and adventurers marched east, answering the call to reclaim Jerusalem. For some, it was piety. For others, plunder. For many, it was both. At the siege of Jerusalem in 1099, crusaders stormed the city walls. Chroniclers claim the streets ran with blood up to the knees of horses. Whether truth or exaggeration, the message was clear. Europe had found a terrifying unity under the cross. From this age rose the warrior monks, the Knights Templar, and the Hospitallers, men who swore vows of poverty and chastity, yet wielded sword and lance in the name of God. The Crusades failed in the long run, but they reshaped Europe. They opened roads of trade, bringing spices, silk, and knowledge from the East. They gave Europe a taste of wealth and a hunger for more. As crusaders marched east, kings battled west. In England and France, 2 great dynasties clashed like titans, the Plantagenets and the Capetians. Their rivalry was not just about land, it was about crowns, pride, and the right to call themselves masters of Europe. Richard the Lionheart, the Crusader king, became the embodiment of chivalry and ferocity. Though famed for his battles in the Holy Land, his greatest struggle was often closer to home, against Philip II of France, a king every bit as cunning as he was brave. The wars between their heirs would stretch on for generations, each skirmish piling kindling onto the fire of resentment. By 1337, the simmering feud erupted into what history remembers as the 100 Years' War, a century of shifting alliances, burned villages, and brutal sieges that turned the fields of France into graveyards. From this chaos, legends arose. Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl claiming visions from God, took command of French armies. Her courage electrified soldiers, and against all odds, she turned the tide of war. Barely 19, she was captured, condemned as a heretic, and burned alive, yet her defiance lit a flame that no executioner could extinguish. On the English side, the weapon of destiny was not a sword, but the longbow. English archers unleashed storms of arrows that pierced armor and toppled knights. Their skill was so valued that the crown made archery practice mandatory on Sundays, a law that turned peasants into battlefield giants. Yet kings were not Europe's only rulers. The church stood above them all. Popes crowned emperors, excommunicated kings, and at times raised armies of their own. The investiture controversy shook Europe as popes and emperors fought over who had the right to appoint bishops. At one point, the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV marched barefoot through the snow to beg forgiveness from Pope Gregory VII, a scene that revealed just how powerful the papacy had become. But power breeds division. In the 14th century, the papacy fractured. Rival popes emerged in Rome and Avignon, each claiming to be the true shepherd of Christendom. For a time, Europe had not one, but 3 competing popes. Christendom's unity, once its greatest strength, became its greatest weakness. Then came the plague. In 1347, a fleet of Genoese ships docked in Sicily, carrying not just cargo, but death. Rats and fleas brought the Black Death into Europe, and within months it spread like wildfire. Bubonic, pneumonic, septicemic, 3 forms of terror, each as merciless as the last. Within 5 years, as much as 1/3 of Europe's population lay in graves. Some towns lost half their people. Others vanished entirely. Churches overflowed with bodies. Bells tolled until their ropes frayed. Plague doctors emerged, wrapped in long cloaks and wearing strange bird-like masks, stuffed with herbs and vinegar-soaked sponges. To terrified peasants, they looked less like healers than omens of doom. Many believed God was punishing mankind. Others accused outsiders, Jews, lepers, even witches, fueling pogroms and violence alongside the pestilence. And yet, amid devastation, change took root. With laborers gone, peasants suddenly found their work more valuable. They demanded higher wages and better conditions. When lords refused, revolts broke out. In England, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 shook the kingdom. In France, uprisings called the Jacquerie set the countryside aflame. The plague shattered Europe, but it also broke the chains of serfdom. Unity, born not from kings or popes, but from shared suffering, reshaped Europe's destiny. By the 15th century, the medieval world was breathing its last. The old order of knights and castles was fading, yet from its ruins rose the first outlines of modern Europe. What had once been a patchwork of feuding lords and shattered kingdoms was beginning slowly and painfully to take the shape of nations. Kings tightened their grip on power. In France, Charles VII broke the dominance of feudal lords by creating one of Europe's first permanent standing armies. Soldiers loyal not to barons, but to the crown itself. In Spain, the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile forged a powerful union, one sealed in 1492, when they not only drove the last Muslim rulers from Granada, but also sent Christopher Columbus across the Atlantic, setting Europe on the path to global empires. In England, the blood-soaked Wars of the Roses finally ended with the victory of Henry Tudor at Bosworth Field. His dynasty would lay the foundation for a centralized English state, ruthless in authority and ambitious in vision. Meanwhile, in the East, the last flicker of Rome was extinguished. Constantinople, the jewel of Byzantium, fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. The shock reverberated across Christendom. With the old trade routes cut off, Europe's gaze shifted westward, over stormy seas and into the unknown. And then came an invention as disruptive as gunpowder: the printing press. For the first time in history, knowledge could travel faster than armies, faster than sermons, faster than kings could hope to contain. Ideas became weapons. From the rubble of Rome to the crowns of kings, from wolves prowling broken roads to ships sailing uncharted oceans, Europe had clawed its way toward unity. Not through peace, not through chance, but through centuries of war, faith, and resilience.